पंडित ओमकारनाथ जी ठाकुर का हिंदुस्तानी संगीत में योगदान। आज डॉक्टर राणे जी, उनका स्वास्थ्य ठीक न होने पर भी उन्होंने यहाँ आने का कष्ट किया है, जिसके लिए हमारे पास कोई शब्द नहीं है। सिर्फ यही है कि संगीत के प्रति उनकी दिलचस्पी, लगन और हमारे परिवार से प्यार, जिसके लिए वो यहाँ आए हैं। हम लेक्चर शुरू कर रहे हैं। धन्यवाद।
A suggestion has been that I may, or if I choose to speak in Marathi, but I don't know, I would begin in English. We must have some sense of continuity. Last time I spoke about ethnomusicology, and I said that culture and music are to be studied together. And perhaps my Nirupan on Omkarnath Thakur would be a continuation of that presentation, where I wanted to connect together music and culture. When you try to discuss a musical form in a perspective of a total culture, you can have one level of discussion, which will be more concrete than discussions of general principles, which we did last time. Coming further down, we will be able to talk about a musician, a particular musician and his art within the perspective of a total culture. And that would be really what is described as practical criticism, that you want to relate a particular manifestation, expression, a particular artist and his work within the perspective of a total available culture. So this is what I propose to do this evening. As it was expected last time, I believe that Indian tradition believes in discussion and not in lecturing. This is a platform which is totally foreign to us. Before the British introduced the university format of education, we never had lectures. We always used to have discussions. And you will find that whether it is Bhagavad Gita or whether it is Gyaneshwari or whether it is Sangeet Ratnakar, whatever, you always begin by questions and answers. So I believe in discussion. Please feel free to voice your disagreements, agreements, approval, disapproval, whatever. Within the short time at our disposal, I would like to pose some questions before ourselves. To make the questions pointed, I will phrase them with more blatantness than suggestion. For example, I would say that why is it that Omkarnath Thakur sang as he did? Or why is it that a particular cultural milieu in which he grew up did not allow him to sing otherwise? Or why is it that he chose certain forms of music for elaboration of his musical ideas and not others? I would also like to point out to you that perhaps, as every creative artist does, he grappled with many ideas, grappled with many forms, and then came to a conclusion that this is the form in which I will express myself fully. I would also ask some questions like, why is it that he felt the compulsion of theorizing about music? Why is it he wanted to write? Why is it he wanted to be an educationist and not just a guru or not a teacher? All these are questions, and similar others would come up. And I am quite sure that if you think of your own favorite artists, you will find many more questions like this coming up. And of course, if you start thinking about artists which you don't like, then of course you will have many more questions. This is all cultural musicology or ethnomusicology is about. So now we are trying to relate ourselves to what we discussed last time. The format which I follow is, of course, play back a recording and then try to discuss with you what emerges through that recording. Some of the points are musicological, some are cultural, and The basic premise is that I would like to know the best of the artist and know the reasons for his best. So criticism, in quotation marks, as it is understood today, is not my goal. Actually, criticism never meant what it is doing today. Criticism meant appreciation and reasoning about it. And that's why I begin by saying that I discuss the artist for the best that he has and not for the worst that he has. Every artist will be a combination of good and bad. But I don't begin my discussion by saying, oh, he sang well, but, and then what follows the longer lines, In India, somebody told me that it seems that you believe in obituaries and autobiographies, but not in biographies. And it's very easy. I mean, after a person dies, first thing that you do is idolize him, that everything that he did was good. Or you feel a rush of freedom and try to criticize everything that he did. You never like biographies, because biographies means, there is a kind of objective, reasonable criteria and testing procedures available. So you don't like that. And autobiography is the easiest, because you know that you know everything. So you can go on writing, you can go on speaking, and nobody is able to challenge you, because it's, after all, your life. So you are supposed to know more about it. I'm trying to suggest that this has happened a lot in performing arts, and it's high time that we try to modify our procedures of appreciating and appraisal. So let me begin by playing back a recording, and then we will discuss what emerges through the recording. I didn't have time to cue it, so you'll have to bear with me for some time. I wanted to bring to your notice two things which are apparent even in this short piece, which is from his later music making period. Firstly, we would see that the moment he begins his music, there is a kind of aura of tone making. He doesn't begin music abruptly. Within that short period, he creates an atmosphere for beginning the music. First, he does that with the tanpuras, which are extremely well tuned, and even in that period when the recording was not as advanced as it is today, you can sense the intention of the artist to create an atmosphere through the drone. Drone, as you know, is extremely important music for two reasons. In Indian music, our music being melodic, you must get a frame, a base on which you are supposed to judge my tunefulness, because it's under my control whether I begin with C sharp or whatever. As you know, relative pitch is what we believe in. We don't have absolute pitch. That's why my C sharp and your C sharp may not differ, but my sa and your sa will differ, because I will have my own. So now he is trying to give you the first thing, that this is where I am going to stand. And that must be provided well to the listener, because then the listener is able to judge you and your manipulations. So he does that in a short while by introducing the drone very well. He doesn't begin immediately. He doesn't take the drone very casually. The drone is a component in his music making, and that's extremely important. Later on, I'm going to suggest to you that amongst the vocalists, Omkarnath was a performer, and among the performer, he was a showman. And this kind of formulation is based on whatever I could get through the recordings, and of course attending his live concerts, reading him and talking to people who knew him, and of course seeing him in various avatars. You know, he used to come to my maternal uncle Baburao Gokhale, who was the principal of Maharashtra Sangeet Vidyalaya, and whether Vinayak Rao Patvardhan or Narayan Raman Rao Padhye or Omkarnath Thakur or Shankar Rao Bodas, you name the Gwalior musicians and they would be there, and I could watch from my vantage point of a childhood, so that I could watch them, hear them discussing things. So I have some things which are apart from this evidence. But basically, as I said, this is the first point. Secondly, he has a conception of malcounts which needs to be put into practice by what? He considers malcounts as a very grave melody, right? He considers that poise is extremely important for singing of malcounts. Thirdly, now this is important, he does not regard the meaning of the text as important as it is in, say, Thumri. So even though he is singing of Piran Jani, etc., he is not going to immerse himself in that feminine emotion. It's not that kind of emotion which he believes in. And still, this music is highly emotional. This music is not like, say, Jaipur Malakams or Agra Malakams. This music making by Omkarnath Thakur begins by the premise that I believe in creation of mood, and that mood is extremely important, and that is very well created in a few, the present terminology, in few bars of music, you would say. I would say a few phrases of music. As this is a later recording, you will also find that he is very careful about enunciation of the words. There are different things. One is known as phonation. That means just create the sound. Then there is articulation, that is shaping of the sound. Then on pronunciation, that means you carve out the consonants and the vowels with the proper kind of values given to me. And then enunciation, which means like diction, you try to phrase according to the content that you want to project. So now this man is trying to project a content which is not emotional in the sense of a thumri, but at the same time it is emotional. And that's why you will see that he takes out certain phrases like Peer na Jane, and then he will create an isolated kind of atmosphere for them. That these words will be taken in isolation. There will be spaces around that word. The words will not come one after the other quickly. He controls the pace of enunciation. I'm not talking of pace of music making yet, because that will be alap and tan, etc. I'm only talking the way he treats the words, which is extremely important. And then we'll come to other ways of looking at it. I will anticipate myself and say that this kind of enunciation which I am talking of, which became accentuated in his later period by a kind of imagination which I describe as dramatic imagination. You know, you can have imagination in music as, for example, if you are singing a thumri, then, or even if you are singing a khyal. People say he sings khyal like a thumri. Now what does that mean? It means that the diction which he uses is like a thumri singer. It's not a khyal diction. It's not a dhrupad diction. Because in every composition, the words will have a value according to the form, according to the gharana, and of course according to the temperament. And Omkarnath Thakur was, as I said, apart from being musico-dramatic personality, I would also suggest you, and I would say that by the time he decided on what kind of music he wanted to project, he felt that he cannot sing dhrupad. He felt that he cannot sing thumri. He felt he cannot sing ghazal. He felt that he can bring everything that he wants to through two forms. One was khyal, the other was bhajan. And he concentrated on these two forms. He tried with many others, as it is known. Musicians, like true artists, are great economists. For example, if they are able to achieve, Arvind Bhai there, so I can quote this example, if they are able to achieve what Surbahar can do in sitar, they will not touch the Surbahar. If you are able to achieve in sitar what bean and sitar can do, then why should you have bean at all? You will only concentrate on sitar. This is a principle of economy. Otherwise, in our language, that is in critical language, you will say that you are going to repeat yourself. There is no greater sin than musical tautology, repeating yourself. If you are going to same thing in khyal as you are going to sing in thumri, then why the hell are you singing two forms? Better concentrate on one form. But try to get everything in that. And that is what Omkarnath ji came to decide later on. And I will, if I have cued rightly, now I will go back and play back to you two earlier recordings, very early recordings, which suggest to you that there his view of khyal was different than what it was here in Malcolm's. See that early recording, you can imagine. Timba. You will see that this was a more youthful voice, early recording, extremely efficient use of timbre. I would like to suggest to you that when Omkarnath ji came on the scene, as you know, he tried his luck in Gujarat first. Later on he moved to Bombay. Then he went back to Gujarat, but then he went to Banaras, which was his working place for a long time. But when he was singing, within his period, Agra music was very popular, very well established. Kirana music was on the rise. Abdul Karim Khan was singing, 10 years senior to him almost. Wazebua has disappeared from the scene almost. Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab had yet to come and establish his idiom. Indore Gharana was not on the scene. So the point is that he was trying to carve out a niche for himself by singing a music which was different from everybody else. And that's why the first thing that I would like to note, all of us should note that every artist wants to be a deviationist. He wants to move away. We always try to say that, oh, you sing like your guru. And we mean this as a compliment, but Shishya never accepts that as a compliment in real spirit, because he is trying to move away from his guru always. He is trying to register a deviation and say something new of his own. And Omkarnath ji was trying to do that. I would like to suggest to you that you listen to, say, Narayan Rao Vyas and Vinayak Rao Patwardhan and Omkarnath, and you would see that here was a man who was deviating from the then accepted Gwalior notion of singing. You will see the way he is trying to have a tonal shadow behind his tones. There is a tapering off of voice. We describe it as register, upper register voice. Now, Abdul Karim Khan Sahab was predominantly using upper register. Other Gwalior musicians were using only the middle and lower register. Omkarnath ji was now using upper register, introducing that into his music and using resonance to the maximum. Now resonance, of course, can be described in many ways, scientifically as well as in the folk way. But the best way to remember is that tonal shadow principle. Your music should not stop when you have stopped singing. The music should linger, and that lingering back procedure, you must have some clue for that in your music, and Omkarnath ji was always giving you that. All these tones used to leave a shadow behind them, and that was a great thing to do. It is very difficult also. The tempo was middle, medium tempo. Still you get a feeling that he has enough space to sing. So he had that poise. In 3.5 minutes, he gave you a feeling that, well, he has gone up to Upper Gandhar, Kharja Pancham, he has sung the whole sthai before you. And now this is important. All the earlier recordings, he always used to have the same composition sung again, in which he will devote it for the faster tempo elaboration. So you can see that Bolana Lagi itself, when it comes to the faster tempo elaboration, he will try to complement his vision in that portion with this particular portion. So now you can see that this is a total vision that he had of the khyal. Mind you, he was not tempted to sing a tintal for drut. He sang the same khyal for the drut. And this was again an older vogue of singing, that you increase the tempo and sing it. Unless you have something different to say, why do you have to have a chota khyal at all? I remember Pandit Ravi Shankar ji once playing Darbari And he said, I am not going to play Drut because that will be Adana. It won't be Darbari. Now his vision of Darbari meant a particular mood which will be totally transformed if you increase the tempo. If the tempo is going to change the mood and if you are not in for it, well, you must make that decision and should not follow only the convention of having Chota Khyal and Bada Khyal together. Here was Omkarnath Ji trying to suggest you that, well, my fast tempo elaboration would be in the same Khyal. And he has done it not twice, almost every time that he sang a Khyal in the earlier period. We'll have the faster tempo elaboration now in the same Khyal. And you will follow that these are the principles he is following very consistently. Tonal shadow, enunciation which is dramatic, and he builds up now contrast. Even in the later recording you saw that he was building up contrast. Now this will be more apparent in the earlier recordings. Later in his singing, he somehow tried to strike a balance between uses of contrast and uses of continuity. But here you will see that the contrast is very much audible. Now you will see that his tans are extremely varied. He has used, as we say, tan of gamak, jabri tan, sapat tan. He has also used two particular ways of approaching tans which are agra specialists, avrohi tans. And aroha, avroha included, and 2.5 octaves, which is a Gwalior kind of thing, which also he has tried. Now here was a laikare. Now he takes up ad or whatever and continues throughout the avartan in that chalan. As musicians grow mature, they change the chalans oftener. In their earlier phase, they tried to stick to that the same chalan and carry it to the end. But you know, logical ends are not always musical ends. So even though logically you may carry on throughout the avartan, it becomes too predictable then. And minutely, if you observe anybody in his prime and in his best imaginative mood, you will see that they make changes. They don't stick to that. You know, barabar ka gana is not important. Barabar ko chhod ke jo hota hai, wo hi important hota hai. So deviation is highly important. Here was a person who was deviating all the time. You will see the words are now well enunciated, but there is no value given to the words. Now otherwise you can't say bo bolan. Or bolan lagi da 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 da. Now this is highly simplistic. This is not laikare. This is beginning of a laikare, but not laikare. You will have to move away from that. If you stick to that, ये exercise हो जाएगा. तो ऐसे exercises पहले पहले recordings में काफ़ी मिलते हैं, because at that time your ability to stick to that pattern is itself an ability. But later on, the ability to move away and become less predictable is what is important. And Omkarnath was trying to tell you that, well, I am trying to change all the time. I also talked of contrast. No, contrast can be very simplistic, like upar ka sa and niche ka sa. Or contrast can be slow tempo immediately followed by fast tempo. Or contrast can be that you use two timbers, open timber and closed timber, various ways. And you will say that Omkarnath is using all of them. All kinds of contrast he is using, and he was intent on using contrast because, as I said, he had a musico-dramatic imagination. And that's why even the enunciation of the words, you will see that they are more dramatic. As we go on, we'll find more evidence of that. Now, next piece, which again I am playing back deliberately, is a use of words which are in a way thumri-like use. That is, you repeat the same words again and again and try to have different moods associated with that. But if you are singing a rag like Nat, which is not a mood-oriented rag, you can say Bhageshri has a mood, Abhogi Kannada has a mood, Jogia has a mood, Malkams has a mood. You can't say Nat Bilawal has a mood. It can't have a mood because it's more or less a mathematically assimilated rag. There are ragas which are more intellectual and there are ragas which are emotional. One should accept the fact. The musicians do that and they treat the melodies accordingly. If you sing everything emotionally, you can't have any information then. Everything cannot be emotional. Just as you know, T.S. Eliot says somewhere, in a poem every word cannot be poetic. Otherwise there won't be any poetry left. So similarly in music, everything cannot be musical. That's why bo bola na laga. This is not bo is not musical. It's almost a prose enunciation of the word. It's rhythmic, highly rhythmic. It gives you stresses and it weaves another kind of pattern. So musicians try with all these. And once you try to know the totality of vision of that person, you should be able to place him properly. But otherwise, if you try to look at him from your point of view, that is how I sing. Somebody asked me, how should you listen to music? I said, listen to music as if he is singing, not you are singing. Most of the times when you listen to others, you see how I would be doing it, how is it doing. You are not in the picture now, he is in the picture. You are not the center of the musical universe, you are on the periphery now, that's why you are sitting there. So one has to realize that. And that way you get best of that music and the musician, which should be our aim, really speaking. Now let's have this short piece in Nat and see the way he enunciates the word karataho. Neha, as you know, the khyal is very well known and it has an emotional tinge. He gives that much, but not very much. He wanted to have more emotion in singing, and finally, I don't know whether we'll have time, that's why I'm saying that finally I found that his best piece is Neelambari, where he struck a balance between emotion, tone, contrast, use of words, resonance of his voice, everything. But now you'll see how he is grappling with certain problems, and the recorded music gives you an evidence of his approach, which is highly important. I hope you see what I meant by his approach towards emotionality, which is a contained emotionality. At the same time, he is trying to induce a mood which is of serenity. Now, karat ho neha ki jhoti jhoti batiyan banaye. The word itself is not highly poetic, it's a routine poetry, but he is investing the poetry with some mood. And you will see the tonal shadows, you will see the contrast. And one more thing, whenever he uses a particular phrase which is of 3 or 4 notes and which is quick in tempo, immediately what follows is a phrase which is full of poise, and that's how he is building the contrast. It doesn't give you a feeling of musician in a hurry. He is a musician who is establishing his mood and has enough time, as they say of a good cricketer, that he has always enough time to make his shots. Similarly, Omkarnath always had enough time. He can have a quick phrase followed by a slow phrase. He is never in a hurry. He knows, he is in control. And that's a great thing. And I'm sure that, this is definitely conveyed to us when we listen to that music. And I'm sure that you will agree with me that in that period when the recording technique was of this kind, he is able to do that. His voice comes through as extremely resonant. And just as there is something like eye-feeling quality about a color, similarly ear-feeling quality of a tone. I remember that when I first listened to Bhimsen Joshi ji, and I felt that I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. I was young, I didn't know enough. Now I know that I don't know enough. At that time I didn't know that. So when I was listening to him, the points of negation I was ticking off quickly. And suddenly I realized, but what was the first thing which appealed to me? That he filled my ears completely. Right from the beginning, my ears were filled with tone. And I said, well, this is important. This is first thing. Otherwise, you will have to grapple to come to the content of the music. Well, when you have a full tone, you don't have to do that. You are immersed in that. And that's Omkarnath ji is able to do almost through all of his recordings. And he is able to do that because he is in full control. Later on, these same qualities, having quick phrases followed by a long pause or whatever, they start disintegrating because he doesn't have then that cohesive imagination which he had earlier. And it's very interesting, paradoxical too, that what makes you as a musician can also mar you. You become a well-known musician because you have a fast tan, and when you are in control of that tan, people accept you. Then the fast tan takes control of you. Then you are not a good musician. People say, tayari ke piche hai, kuch maza nahi aa raha hai. So fast tan is accepted as fast, but you are not accepted a musician then. And that's paradoxical. And Omkarnath ji's case, this happened. I remember this happened in case of Master Krishna Rao also. That what made them also mar their careers, because they were not able to control later on the same kind of imaginative approach that they had. And what were the causes? Perhaps we'll be able to discuss that. But now I am trying to make one more point. Curator also he sings in a faster tempo, but I won't have enough time to cue. I will continue with that. You won't mind if you listen to 3.5 minutes more, quicker. It makes the same point. Abdul Karim Khan Sahab always used to have a O-car throughout his enunciation. Agra Gharana has A-car in their pronunciation. Gwalior has A-car, but slightly dry A-car. Omkarnath ji was deviating from that A-car, but not following Abdul Karim Khan's O-car, because he had a tremendously resonant voice. So he is able to have all the vowels projected very powerfully and with resonance. That was the quality, it's uppermost. This is not Gwalior Tan, as you know. Every time he will sing a mukhra, it's not in the same way. I mean, he's pitching the mukhra in various ways. That's one way of introducing a contrast. You are changing the bandish. You know, bandish is after all a play of constants and variables. And mukhra is always kept constant. So that with reference to that mukhra, you have other variables which you can judge. Now here is a person trying to change the mukhra. Once he has introduced the mukhra, in the earlier phase he has not changed this so much. It's only in Drut phase where he changes it often. Because now this is to be taken in a continuity, and he has now introduced changes. You will also see that every time he says karataho, then again comes back and says karataho, shadjape, once more. Because all the time he is trying to give you that drone feeling. And that is extremely important. Like car hona is mushkil. There you have the creativity aspect coming in. Now here at this phase he was a laikar, not only laidar. But as time went on and as one listened to him, one got a feeling that he was not in control of the tal aspect. Music was disintegrating fast. He was tilting in favor of drama than music. As I said, musical-dramatic imagination is a difficult thing to handle. And later on, it was not possible all the time. But as I said, once again, he is to be judged by the best that he produced. And that was definitely enough to rank him amongst the major deviationists of early years of 20th century. He made a big contribution by introducing this kind of tone, emotionality, which was different from what everybody else was doing. For example, in Abdul Karim Khan Sahab, you will always get a feeling that the only emotion that he had was anguish, sadness. Even when he was singing, say, Ugisa ka Kanta Ganjita, it was sad. Even when he was singing Pani Bhareli, that Pani Bhareli was sad thumri, it was a happy thumri. Everything what he did was full of sadness. I am reminded of what Ratanjankar Tagore used to say in a tone of complaint about Hindustani music. He used to say, this Hindustani music compels me to sing of universal sorrows, doesn't allow me to sing of my own sorrow. It doesn't have a place for individuals. It has always a place for universal sorrow, universal sentiment. Well, I am a person. I want to sing of my own sorrows. So he had to compose songs. He was a poet, he wanted to be a composer. Why? Because he said, my poem has an individual, personal element of sorrow, which these composers are not able to take it, because they will immediately think of, let us have Jogia. And that means, it's a universal element. No. I want to have my own sadness, my own joy, my own gladness, my own sense of dependency, abundance, whatever. This is how musicians try to have their individual idiom included in music. And Omkarnath Ji was one of the major musicians who was able to achieve that. Next piece is in the negative point that he sang a thumri and was not able to say anything particular in that. I'll play that only for a minute or so just to make this point. As I said, that he grappled with various forms and then decided in favor of that particular craft. He felt, oh, okay, this is now enough for me. I remember I have asked these questions to many musicians. I asked Mallikarjun ji that which is your favorite form and why? You ask every musician, he will say, हाँ हमारे घराने में तो सबकी तालीम मिलती है. इधर झूठ सच मालूम नहीं, बट सभी ऐसा ही बोलते हैं. हमारे घराने में सब कुछ है, फिर गाते क्यों नहीं आप? सीधा सवाल है. So that means, well, you may say that as I have tested this, I corroborated this. Mallikarjun ji said, बस हमारी निष्ठा ख्याल पे, जो कुछ कहना वो ख्याल में ही कहेंगे. सिखाया हमको, मैं उसमें मज़ा नहीं आता. Because I asked him, you have learned from Gwalior Gharana. Gwalior Gharana sings tappas, taranas. Do you know taranas? He said, yes, I know. He sang one or two taranas, which were well executed, but his heart was not in it. So he said, no, I'm not going to sing taranas. Khyal is sufficient for me. And this is also a very major decision, that why you should sing. Otherwise, to become popular, what people can do is, of course, try to do everything so that, if A likes this in my music, B will like this in my music, and C will like this. So ABC will be present there. So finally what happens is that A would come only for that person, then go away. So you will have an intermittent kind of auditorship. This doesn't help. You have to be a specialist. Specialist in doing, but not specialist in appreciating music. And this is how Omkarnath Ji tried his hand or his voice at thumri and failed. And he realized that the greatness lies in realizing your failure and not persisting with it. He didn't persist with that. Let's see that. I feel that he is not able to give anything special in this thumri than what he did in, say, Nat or any other raga. That's because he was not attuned to the spirit of thumri. And here I am now introducing one note for discussion. And as I said, ethnomusicology means what? I feel that the temperament that guided Omkarnath ji was not free from the purity aspect which is valued by musicians, and especially those who come from classes like Brahmins, or those who are high caste, or those who are not aware of the enjoyment side of life as such. Let us put it that way. Omkarnath ji was struggling with this kind of ethos in his mind. Finally he decided on a role, and everything that he did, whether he spoke, whether he stood, whether he sat or sang, everything was full of that role. And that role he decided to adopt. And naturally, it's very interesting that he came to theorizing, and in that theorizing, he talked only of two things in a major way. One was rasa theory, the other was Bharata. The moment you move away from contemporary scene, it becomes very easy to adopt a particular role which can talk of purity, authenticity, tradition, everything else. But if you are talking of contemporary musical reality, there are no clear-cut dividing lines possible. Then it becomes very difficult. And Omkarnath ji, as I said, why did he leave ghazal singing? As you know, Kalapi and other poets had a very strong tradition of ghazal in Gujarat. Omkarnath ji spent 3 quarters, he died when he was about 70. And last 15 years he was in Banaras. Before that, thrice he went back to Gujarat, then came back to Bombay, and finally felt that no, this is not my music. He also did away, as I said, with tarana type of singing. Though he had full of tayyari, his voice was very pliant, he was able to have faster tempo elaborations very quickly. But that was too dry for him. Neither could he sing taranas like Bhairavi ka tarana is Nisar Hussain Khasa. Now you will see in that tarana you have Qawwali kind of tan patterns very energetically woven into that. Now that's another kind of liberation of a form, that to try to bring in some other form into it. He was not able to do that, so he left that away. So he decided on certain kind of music making, and he tried to do justice to his own talent as well as his own vision of music. If you read his Pranav Bharati or his lecture on Rasa and Raga, you will find that he is trying to create an aura again, aura of the tradition this time, and trying to justify his way of music making. Now this is very interesting. Anybody who is a poet, if he writes literary criticism, he unconsciously tries to justify his own way of creating. And in Omkarnath ji's case, this happened. In his case, the way he taught also happened the same way. We know his disciples. There are clear cut. You have Premlata ji, who follows Bharata and textual tradition very closely. And she is all for Bharata. At the same time, you have Indrajam, who is now trying to evoke music through violin in an Indian way. She doesn't believe in the tone of the violin. She believes in the tone of Omkarnath Thakur. You will see that she translates that tone in violin. So this is the overweening principle of music making which has influence, because it has of course naturally some substance, otherwise nothing will influence you. So now I would go in for other illustrations. Unfortunately they are not recorded in the order I would like you to listen, but you will make that kind of adjustment. We will sing Desi Todi now. One more aspect about Gwalior musicians is worth noting. As you know, in Gwalior there are two main branches. One is Gwalior based Gwalior and another is Maharashtra based Gwalior. Now Maharashtra based Gwalior branch, even though they knew Aprachalit Ragas, they prefer to call them not Aprachalit Ragas. That is, they will say not Samant Kalyan, they will say Kalyan Ka Prakar, which is sufficient, because just a minor deviation doesn't make it a full-fledged identity. That was the logic. भैरव बाहर कभी पहले ये कहते नहीं थे लोग, भैरव की बाहर कहते थे, क्योंकि भैरव में थोड़ी सी बाहर की, यहाँ से वहाँ से कुछ लाया, निधन ऐसा करने से बाहर आता है या नहीं, हमको नहीं जचता नहीं है. तो musicians used to have this kind of vision कि every raga need not be and cannot be codified. And Gwalior branch believed in that. I will give you another anecdote here, but as you know, anecdotes have a place in oral tradition because they hand down the formulae of music making. We have one bandish, Ho Miya Sun Javi Ve. And I was taught that this is in Sarparda. Now, I read a lot of grammar of music, my mistake, but then I read it. And then I couldn't sing this Ho Miya Sun Javi Ve because that did not tally with the Sarparda grammar which I have read about. So like a fool, I stopped singing that bandish. But like a wise man, I consulted another wise person. So once Krishna Rao Pandit ji was singing in Sidnam College, I went to see him. तो उन्होंने पहले पूछा, कौन हो आप? मैंने कहा, मैं गजानन राव जी का शागिर्द हूँ, अशोक रानडे. अपने ही हो, बैठो. बैठने की इजाज़त मिल गई. फिर मैंने कहा, एक सवाल पूछना था आपसे. क्या बोले? मैंने कहा, वो हो मियाँ सुन जावी वे, वो सरपरदा में ऐसा बताया, मगर उसमें कोई सरपरदा का गंध नहीं आता है, क्या करूँ उसको? तो बोले, कुछ भी बिलावल का प्रकार गाओ, 5 मिनट ये बंदिश गाओ, गाना बंद करो. He wanted to suggest to me that on any Bilawal ka prakar, if you sing this drut for a while, it will make a point of deviation. That's sufficient for it. Don't codify it immediately. फिर उन्होंने कहा, हर चीज को राग में होना जरूरी है क्या? And I like that question because that provides me an answer. A composer need not be bogged down by the condition that he has to compose in a raga. He may begin from a raga and may end up with something which is not in raga, but it can be a bandish. बंदिश की व्याख्या ऐसे करना गलत है कि वो राग में होना चाहिए. नो, नहीं तो राग में इतने बंदिश है, वो बंदिश कैसे कहेंगे? ऐसे भी लगता है ना कि राग में तो होती है, जान नहीं होती उसमें. हो मिया सुन जावी वे, हो मिया सुन जावी वे, सुना कबूत ना लवे, नाही मिलदा मिया के करा की तवल जावी वे, हो मिया सुन जावी. आठो पहर मनु कंदे रह दे, सुनर उठरु भल मन दाता मन ले, हो मिया सुन जावी. इसको कैसे बिलाल में बिठाना है? कौन सा भी बिलाल गाओ, 5 मिनट गाओ, बंद करो, हो गया असर उसका जो होना है वो. दिस आई बिलीव इज अ म्यूजिशियंस परफॉर्मर्स लॉजिक and it has a great deal to teach us, and Omkarnath ji knew that. But I was talking about अप्रचलित राग. ग्वालियर वालों में अप्रचलित राग जरूर है, मगर वो अप्रचलित करके गाना वो उनको मंजूर नहीं था. But there came a phase when the अप्रचलित रागास were on the ascendancy. तो सभी को लगने लगा कि अप्रचलित गाएं तभी प्रेस्टीज है, तो प्रचलित को भी अप्रचलित के तरीके से गाना शुरू किया लोगों ने. नहीं तो राग बनाना शुरू किया, यहाँ से एक निषाद और थोड़ा करो, फर्क करो तो हो जाएगा. फिर क्या, लाइक इंडियन पॉपुलेशन, इंक्रीज ऑफ नंबर ऑफ रागास, बट अनलेस दे हैव एन आइडेंटिटी, क्या करे उसका. बट आई एम टेलिंग यू दिस काइंड ऑफ एनेक्डोट बिकॉज आई फील दैट हियर वॉज अ म्यूजिशियन. नाउ आई एम क्वाइट श्योर दैट ये जो अब गा रहे हैं, इन ओंकारनाथ जी का जो मैं बजाने जा रहा हूँ आपके सामने, वो देसी तोड़ी करके उन्होंने गाया है ज़रूर. इस तरह की देसी ग्वालियर में नहीं गाई जाती थी. He wanted to interpret it differently. On the other hand, if you remember Durga, when Bhaskar Bua sang in Bombay, Govind Rao Tembe has written about him कि उन्होंने कुछ रागिनी गाई, कुछ पता नहीं चला, बाद में उन्होंने नाम बताया दुर्गा. तो उस वक्त दुर्गा अप्रचलित समझा जाता था. Now same ग्वालियर वाला simplified Durga to such an extent that Durga died a natural death. अब कोई भी दुर्गा नहीं गाता. बट एट द सेम टाइम इफ यू रिमेंबर व्हाट वाज द ओरिजिनल कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ दुर्गा, तो इट वाज नॉट दैट सिंप्लीफाइड कॉन्सेप्ट. तो ये होता है रागों के साथ. एंड दैट्स व्हाई इफ यू वांट टू इंटरप्रेट अ राग, यू हैव टू सी कि उसका खुद का कहना क्या है, वो जान लेना चाहिए पहले. हमको क्या कहना है वो उसमें से नो व्हाट इट हैज़ टू से. हमारे लावणी वाले कहते हैं इसका क्या कहना है, ये सवाल होता है हमें, अरे लावणीचं म्हणणं काय है. That you have to say, not what you have to say. You are a peripheral object. You are coming here as an excuse to make music, but you are not the center of the universe. ये पहले जान लेना चाहिए. Music is greater than musicians. आइडियाज आर ग्रेटर देन इंस्टीट्यूशंस, ये समझ लेंगे तभी बात होगी. One of the controversial statements which I made years earlier when I was talking of Kumar Gandharva was that Kumar Gandharva's intonation was anticipated by Omkarnath ji. Is not in ease. Even this Madhya tempo gaiki, which Kumar Gandharva always advocated, is the best idiom for singing. Omkarnath ji was doing that quite early. Same in spell. Two more pieces if you can. We can have discussion anytime. This one is fast, early piece. See the time pattern that he has. Nilambari. This is the piece I wanted to play last. I think this is the best piece that he produced for two reasons. In this piece, he has succeeded in transcending the concept of raga. Now he is singing a song. He is not singing sthai antara. He is not singing boltan and tan and all those that go with the codified expression of raga. He is now full, imbued with the spirit of singing a song, that's all. And that he has made successful. You will see that there are no tan patterns here. There is no step-by-step elaboration of the raga. There is nothing like, having a logic of musical phrases. That isse alag rakhna hai, इससे अलग रखना है, इसलिए ऐसे गा रहे हैं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं. That becomes the ultimate of a musician. You may begin by singing a raga, but you should not end by singing the raga. You have to move away, go out. And that is music of transcending that. And I have other pieces, but it's not necessary. One can have a discussion now. I have made my statement about Omkarnath's music as such. And I think it's high time that we discuss our major musicians in a fashion in which we try to understand the best that they have and the reasons which produce that best from them. And of course there are other aspects to Omkarnath's personality. As I said, there are non-musical aspects. Ethnomusicology gives importance to that too. From which class he came, what were the earlier influences on him, what he wanted to move away from, what he wanted to accept, how many languages he knew really, how many languages he can feel in. Reading is not sufficient. You must feel that language. And obviously Omkarnathji felt language to a certain extent, and apart from that he couldn't, and that's why he couldn't sing thumris, he couldn't sing ghazal, he couldn't sing taranas, he couldn't sing tappa, but he knew what he was singing. And of course, this is how a musician gropes and comes to some kind of formula solution, which is a personal solution. But if it has substance enough, it agrees with many, because everybody wants to see, oh yes, this is something which I also like to have said it. I couldn't say that, but yes, this was really well said. And I think the best test of a musician is that. You always feel, oh, I would have liked to say that. He said it so well. And that kind of feeling Omkarnathji continues to give us when you listen to his recordings. When he wrote on music, it was a different kind of effort, and you have to assess him differently in that role. As an educationist, he had a different role. There also you need to assess him differently. You cannot mix up roles. You can't say because he was a good musician, he was a good teacher, and because he was a good teacher, he was a good theoretician. Might be. No. There was a time when musicians were theoreticians in India, and that was the best time, because then theory and music were closely related. But later on, it is in afterlife, that is, it's in later life that Omkarnathji paid attention to theory. Later he felt the necessity of doing it. He was trying to justify his way of looking at music. And that's only half story. Later on you have to realize that, well, my vision is one of the visions possible. And then your theory develops and becomes a comprehensive theory of music. He could have and he would have done that, but then one has to understand the situation in which he was working and the point of his departure, from where he started and where he ended up, is important. You have to see the distance that man had to travel. Now we'll be celebrating his centenary in 1998, so you can realize when in 1910 he started learning music, Bhatkandeji has already formulated his theories, and music world was then inundated by this theorization of later years, and people had to find their place in that theory, find their music, their place, and they felt, oh, this is not what I mean, or, well, okay, this is it, then I will sing it that way. That started, it became a reference point. And then that's why Omkarnathji had to struggle very hard, and stories are different when he is assessed as a composer. He has also composed a lot. All these roles will have to be evaluated when we really want to discuss contribution of Omkarnathji to Hindustani music. So this is only a beginning, as I said. One can do such exercises utterly to our own benefit. Fortunately, he won't be affected by what you say and what you do. He is at peace. And we'll have to come to our own peace by judging him correctly and trying to understand what he meant. Questions now? Thank you. Intonation wise, yes. These were two contemporary streams. If you see the performing spectrum that both these have, finally I get a feeling that if for example, that in 1934, how many places Omkarnathji sang and what did he sing? If you can have that kind of chronology, one would immediately know how they have progressed. And contemporary musicians influence each other in a very interesting manner. This is a kind of intonation which is good, but I don't want to take it entirely. And Omkarnathji did that. Because as I said, when Abdul Karim Khan Sahab came from Baroda to Bombay and forged his idiom, the only way he could proceed was moving away from other idioms. And then the idiom which he formulated and forged for himself was based on the nasal upper register high pitch voice. And that was the timbre he used. And Omkarnath ji deviates from that because he has a different kind of voice and also different kind of emotionality which he wanted to project. So instead of influence, you will see parallels, because otherwise his statement of music is different. But yes, there are similarities and they are of course interesting, interchange of musical influence. He moves away from Gwalior in many respects, as you would see. He is a deviationist, that's a major one. When I wrote on Kumar Gandharva, I liked that musician and a person very much, and he is the only musician whose programs I reviewed. Otherwise I don't review, because I feel that reviewing as it is done is no reviewing at all. I wanted to review each of his efforts, and I did that. And in one of my articles I suggested that here is, as it is said, atavism, the earlier generation influences are coming in his music. And that means, in the usual Kumar Gandharva Bhakta style, he is not original. He has imbibed influences. So people rebelled against that. They were not very happy with my statement. And I always say that in India it is extremely difficult to be original, because so many better minds have done so much work that you can assimilate and be happy. There's no problem about that. So if I say that Kumar Gandharva has imbibed things from Abdul Karim Khan, Wazebua and Omkarnath, that doesn't negate from Kumar Gandharva's credit at all, because everybody uses same ingredients but in a different manner. So why not? But then analyze them and say, okay, this is from this, this is from this. That helps, yes. The point is that he projected his effort not as a rag singing. What would you usually associate with rag singing? For example, you will say that there will be logic of idioms, there will be play of vadi samvadis, there will be bol alap, bol tan, etc. It's like painters naming something as something, but does that mean that you will construe the whole thing accordingly? Yeah, that's better.
Neelambari is the rag that he has composed, right? So, did he not conceive it as a particular swara structure? May not be Vadi Samvadi, but a particular way of singing it, with a particular swaras in that particular rag.
It's like, I will give you a parallel. This is a crux of the matter and we can debate it on and on. Somebody writes a poem and we say, have you written a sonnet? He said, no, I wrote a poem. It might be a sonnet. So my intention is not to sing a raga. My intention is to give you a cluster of emotions which are based on what is generally perceived as raga. But I am not singing a raga. I will stick to that statement because I feel that the usual way of looking at raga is absent here. For example, in this particular bandish, he never comes on the sum as he does in, say, Desi Todi. You must have seen that. What is that kind of graha where some aati hai, some aa jati hai, and he is not stressing mita va, he is not stressing that at all. These are the things which make it a song and not a khyal. For example, would you have really called it a khyal?
No, I'm not saying that, I'm not differentiating between a khayal and a song.
No, it would be necessary to differentiate that, that's what I'm saying.
I'm just wanting to know whether the statement that you made that he sang it as a song and not a rag.
Yes.
The song, is it not based on a particular swara structure which is called Neelambari?
It begins with a particular structure, that much I grant. But it doesn't stick to that. That's the point. Would you say that the way he sang it in Desi Todi or in even Shuddha Kalyan. It is the kind of elaboration that you get here.
I feel that this particular English presentation is not what we call a representative presentation of Nilamari as such, but on a concert stage, when he's singing a full rag, half an hour or whatever, he would have done it in the form of a rag.
It is interesting. You have made two statements here that on a concert stage he would have elaborated it differently. Even that can't make it is a representative statement. Right. So the point is that if he chose to record this, that has to be given some value. If in Shuddha Kalyan he can have tans and boltans of a similar duration in another record he eschews tans, what does it mean? It's a very purposeful act. Yeah, particular presentation of that piece, and then I'm going ahead and I'm saying that it's very interesting you mentioned that in instrumental music we do this, because instrumental music is liberated from the actions of the words. I mean, whatever, yes. But the point is that when he is singing Mitava, you don't get a feeling that he is singing a khyal. That's the main point. And I call it a song, as I said. And sorry to say, but unless you really know the whole repertoire of Indian songs, you will never understand what is songness. Songs are available in primitive music, songs are available in folk music, songs are available in popular music, in devotion music and art music. In the very first introduction I said that if we really want to discuss these terms, now song is a tremendous genre, just as poetry. How would you discuss poetry? By using one language repository of literature or other languages too. Similarly, in this case, if we want to understand the songness of a song, we will have to listen to many songs of many categories, and only then we will understand that. And here, as I said, I mean, everybody can have a statement for and against, but I am making a statement here and mean it very sincerely that Omkarnath ji here succeeds because he is not singing a khyal, he is not singing a rag, he is singing a song. And that's why he gives you that kind of emotional satisfaction, which is in a way not bound down by any form. You don't listen to it as a khyal. You listen to it as a music. I remember one more quotation here. T.S. Eliot wrote 4 shorter poems or longer poems called 4 quartets. One of them is totally on music, but the whole quartet is imbued with spirit of music. He says, music was heard so deeply that it was not heard at all. The paradox is that it was heard so deeply that it was not heard as music. It was taken as an experience. So I feel that this particular piece gives me an experience of having heard an experience, but not khyal. I'm not aware of what tal he played. I mean, the very first time I listened to it, usually we are musicians, we immediately tick off what is the tal is doing, what is the saregama, what can be the vadi samvadi. It never occurred to me because the flow of music was such that I was taken into that as a song. And I feel that he meant it as a song. Otherwise he would have sung it differently. If he can do that in other cases in 3.5 minutes, certainly he could have done that here too. That's my...
If I repeat the question, what and how, you talked a lot about the how part. Would you like to say something about the content of his music? Because I do feel that the content sets many trends. And so my supplementary question would be that what he was as a musician, what he did and how he did and so on. But was, in your opinion, what is his contribution, unique contribution, which has had an impact on the subsequent musical renderings?
3 short answers to that. One is, of course, the tone of voice which he brought to singing as such. As you know, try to see the contemporary musicians, and I gave you examples of Vinayakrao Patwardhan and Narayan Rao Vyas. The senior ones, of course, were Krishna Rao Pandit from Gwalior and so many others, or Mushtaq Hussain. I mean, you name and you have. Or we have Abdul Karim Khan Sahab singing, or Keshav Bhai Kerkar singing. Wazebua had passed on, or Bade Ghulam Ali was about to come. These. Then you will see that he introduced a distinctive timbre, which, as I said, he made it emotional but not emotional in the sense of, say, Abdul Karim Khan or any Thumri singer or etc. So this is a contribution, because karata ho otherwise, to sing that with that kind of serenity and not as a, raga structure. People intend to sing ragas, but they don't sing music. So here I think he introduced a major one.
Did it make a trend?
Yes, he set a trend. And as I said, the trend transpired, say, even in instrument, which is a very important thing. That N. Rajam to play that idiom is important to consider. This is an influence. Or there are other musicians who tried to sing that way, but Omkarnath ji had a head start because of his voice. And none of his disciples could have that kind of voice. I mean, Balwant ji Bhatt sang, he also learned from him, and many others too. Rasiklal, I think, Andheriya learned from him for some time. Vinod Dikshit and Barve. But none had that kind of voice. So it became very difficult for them. Another tone which I said is including, not only emotionality and serenity, etc., the tone, etc., but a kind of virtuosity which is not dry. I didn't play that, but if you listen to his Suha Kannada, it's a tremendous tayari, but then it's a dry piece. And that suggests to us that, well, he was aware that this is tayar enough, but this is dry. So he eschewed that. And I feel that this is an important contribution at that time. I do feel that when Bade Ghulam Ali came here, what did he introduce? He introduced an emotionality which was not heard before. And that became a trendsetter. Or when Ustad Amir Khan Sahab started singing, he had the tempo itna vilambit kar diya ki taal was almost rubbed off the surface. It only became a timekeeper because he wanted to have full-fledged freedom given to melody and nothing else. So these kind of things happen to centrate because they contribute something, and Omkarnath ji did that.
What about the content part?
Yes, the content, in a good piece, content and the way it is projected cannot be analyzed. They become one and the same. The medium is the message, as they say. And here emotionality brought to a particular intonation is the content of the music there. They did, as you know, that Kumar Gandharva used that. So these kind of influences are always percolative influences. Unless you have very strong disciples who sing similarly, you are not able to say this line is carried forward. But overall in the tradition you feel, oh, this man must have taken this from this. You make that statement. This is how people have borrowed from him, assimilated from him, benefited from him.